Just did a video on the 170. Fantastic. Took me half an hour. No sound. So let's redo it, eh? No doubt it will be better the second time around. But even so. So the 170, you might have heard of the 170. You might not have done. It is basically a caster that came out of competition. It was named because instead of trying to match the bend and the rod to the size of the casting arc as we normally teach, the rod tip, the rod was traveling through 170 or even 180 degrees. And while it may not do that anymore with some of the stiffer rods we are using, we are certainly not trying to match the casting arc to the bend in the rod. We are instead powering through the point when the rod tip deviates from the trajectory of the line path. This video is not for everybody. It might be interesting to a few people, but in order to make this work, you need to have loops certainly under control. I would suggest that you want to be able to vary the size of your loops on demand. You need to be able to track straight. You've got to have a pretty effective double haul, and you want to have a fairly long carry, maybe 60 or even 70 feet before you start going into some of this stuff. But there's two parts to this. I'm going to break this down to the way I teach it, which I do in my Zoom lessons. It comes in over 3 lessons. I teach the stopless delivery on the forward cast, the stopless delivery on the back cast, and then finally I glue them together. I consider the 170 cast to be 2 stopless back-to-back delivery casts. Don't know if that makes a lot of sense, but hopefully it will at the end. This cast originally came out of the Best of the West in the States. I went there in 2002, I think, or 2003 to take my Triple F Masters, and when I was there I met all the guys who were competing in the Best of the West: Lance Egan, Ryan Barnes, Jim Gunderson, Ian Walker, Stephen Tim Rajeff, and Rick Hartman. And I was training at that time with a guy called John Allen in the UK, and I sent all these videos to him. I also put them up on Sexy Loops, and I remember saying to John, I said, these are all very interesting casts apart from one who looks like an elephant trying to learn to cast, and that was Rick Hartman. So following year I went back, had my summer over there, spent my summer in Montana, and I was driving down to see Bill Gamble. I was going to hang out with Bill and fish for bass and redfish with him and Rick down in Texas. And on the way down, I met up with Rick in Telluride, and we went fishing. And in the afternoon, we cast in a field, and it totally blew me away. I have never been so impressed, so dazzled with casting in my life. Instead of casting loops you could drive a bus through, you would throw loops that could go through a needle, and they were going 10-15 feet further than mine. And when that happens, you're just going to go, well, I'm going to have to learn that now. And I had to write to John and say, I'm sorry mate, we got to learn to do what Rick's doing, because it was unbelievable. And so I kind of learned it, and we used to do a lot of competitions in the UK. I used to have competitions in my garden. We had all the best casters and distance casters in the UK, or all the ones taking it seriously coming along. Everybody learned it. I really dominated for quite a long time. I set some British records, 130 feet, and it's all down to this technique. The World Championships happened, I think they started about 12 years ago in Norway, and I would say of all the 5-weight distance casters, 80% are probably using a form of 170, especially the competitive ones. It was interesting, Glenn McCormick, he said to me, I met him in Estonia, and he said to me, I'd like to learn this European style. And I'm thinking, since when was Texas in Europe, you know? It's about as far away as you can get. You might as well say we've gone to the moon. But, so anyway, it is a distance casting competition. It is a distance competition technique. It's also very fishable. I use it when fishing. It's like the double haul came out of competition. Well, the 170's come out of competition. The stopless delivery elements, however, I teach to anybody taking shots in the salt. So I think you have to be consistently casting about 70, 75 plus feet to even consider this part. But I teach it, and I'm about to teach those two separate lessons. And then the gluing it together, I used to teach to only advanced casters, 110, 115 feet. I only have 3 levels. I have beginners, intermediate, and advanced. Steve Rager, he's advanced. He's high advanced, but he's advanced. So I used to just teach. I didn't used to glue it together as a fully blown 170 until my Zoom lessons about 2.5 years ago, when I had a guy, Michael, my first student. I taught him the 2 bits together. He was only thrown about 85, 90 feet, so he wasn't in that upper echelon, and it just looked a little bit robotic, and it looked rushed, and it was really difficult to get him to slow down and be smoother. So I thought I'll teach him the 170. I'll glue these 2 delivery bits together, and it completely transformed his cast. It was like switching on a light, walked into a new room. You know, he was a completely different caster. And I thought, I wonder if other people will get the same out of this. And so I do a lot of Zoom teaching. I've done about 50 students in the last, for 12 lessons in the last 2.5 years. And I've taught all but one. I've taught all the ones who've done 12 lessons. And every one of them has helped their cast. It hasn't necessarily given any more distance, but it's made them smoother. It's given them more control. It's given that high line speed shot, which I was teaching separately, but the gluing it together gives something else. I don't quite know what it is. I haven't worked it out yet, but it's like going down a 3-lane highway. You've got closed stance accuracy, you've got open stance distance, and then you've got the 170. The outside lane, the one with the black BMW flashing his lights to try and get past you, that's the 170, okay? All right, it's hot out here, so I'm not going to spend too long doing that. Let me teach you the stopless delivery and the forward cast, which I introduced in one of the first 2 or 3 lessons. I usually introduce it with the roll cast, if you're a teacher, if you're looking to learn it that way. And that one's not going to go very far. Look at that. Whoever's put this line together managed to get this line caught over the top of the rod. Oh, Jesus. Where are the professionals? That's what I want to know. I mean, done once, it's done twice. I bet that was a gourami that did that. Oh, God. Give me a step ladder. Now, what the hell? All right, sweaty. I might have to jump in the lake in a minute. But that's 32 degrees. All right, so stopless delivery. I would normally teach it in a roll cast. I actually introduce the stopless delivery when I'm teaching pullback. I teach pullback, the hard stop, and then stopless delivery. Sorry, that's a message. That's from Steve Rager. He's saying don't teach them this pull. So there's 3 casts: a stopless pullback, which is like whipping a towel, and then there's a stopless delivery, and we're just going to talk about that, which is to often, actually, this is the way that the Americans often teach the roll cast, is to come up into position and then whack the rod tip all the way down to the water. And we're just going to do the same thing in the overhead cast. Don't splash it down like I just did. Aim 1 inch higher than that, and then it comes down whack, and it comes down a little bit more gently, right? But you've got the line speed there. Instead of stopping the rod here to get the tight loop, we're just taking the rod tip all the way down to the surface, and you can see the increase in line speed there. Okay, and that was a bit splashy, but you get the idea. So come up, whack. And if you're casting into the wind, that's what you want to do. If I've got a very strong headwind coming at me, this is like airplane wind. You've got 2 targets, right? So if I want to make my cast here, my back cast has to be high. So what I do is I just lean it over a little bit. My back cast is still high, but now this angle it approaches to the wind is lower. In other words, I tilt my casting arc over to the side. Okay, come up here, finish pointing at the target. And at this point, I would also introduce something Dan McCrimmon called the cradle grip. He was watching Rick do it, and it's where the rod butt is held in the curvature of these fingers. The pressure is between the first finger and the thumb, and we're going to turn. We come through, and we're going to turn. We're going to close the rod, a bit like clicking the fingers, but with the third finger. And this is going to give us even more line speed. Okay, that's part one. And then I get the student. They go away. They go and practice that. They go and train that 1 or 2 weeks. Come back, and they've nailed it. I normally get the 3 targets out. I say make a pullback, make a hard stop, make stopless. You know, so you're drilling it in different lengths. It's not all just one distance. Okay, and get that rod tip down. Really anchor it down. Next lesson, I then teach the backhand. So that's really important. So if you're on the front of a boat here, this is, you know, the front of the boat. This is all forehand territory, right? But if I want to go this way, and there's the guy standing behind me here, I've got to come this way for these shots. So I teach this to all of my guests who come here fishing with me, because the fish are not always going to be here. Sometimes the fish are going to pop up here. Free rides are going to pop up here. What are you going to do? You're going to try to cast over here. You're going to hook me? No. You're going to learn to make this delivery shot like this. Another example. Let's say we're coming up this bank here and we're throwing into the bank, and the wind is coming this way. So now you've got to bring the loop this side of you. So this is a really good shot. Also, let's say we're in the front of the boat and we've got a wind coming at us. Now we need the line speed. Rod butt tucked under the forearm. Okay. Now, stance, very important. Stance is like my open stance distance. I was going to cast this way. Right foot's at 90 degrees, left foot's pointing the target. And I'm going to pick up from here. Okay. Rod butt tucked under the forearm. The casting stroke is this side. Okay. And I'm going to cast by extending from the elbow, pointing at the target. Where people go wrong is you do this. Low back cast. Okay. You've got to stop here, come in, this position here, leading with the elbow. Okay, looking over the shoulder. Okay, in here, whack. Not like this. This is very weird. In here. Okay, 90 degrees, casting off this shot over this foot here. Whack. Okay, and now let me tell you something. You can get as good and as powerful casting this backhand and as accurate as casting forehand. I can do it. If I can do it, you can do it. I'm as good taking shots this way as I am this way. In fact, I know at least 2 guys in competition who throw distance off the backhand delivery because they find it more powerful. 3, Mark Zoddotti, right? So there's a lot of guys who will do this. It's a very important cast. It's, you know, some people talk about casting left-handed over the shoulder. This, get into this position here, whack. Okay, so that's something that I find really important. Okay, so you've got this stopless delivery in the forward, whack. And you've gone up here and you've got this stop delivery in the back cast. Make sure you finish pointing at the target. Don't stop here. This is a stopless delivery one. Get the rod tip down. Full arm stretch. Compare that back cast, whack, to open stance distance. Okay, the open stance distance is here from the wrist. We block the forearm, we flip the wrist. Talked about that a couple of weeks ago. Whereas this is much more powerful because we've come in here, we've got the elbow pointing at the target, and all we're going to do is we're going to straighten that elbow. And at the same time as straightening that elbow, I'm going to make the hold. Okay, so actually it's both of them straighten. It's easy, and you get the best haul you're ever going to get. It's a really great distance cast. You know, if you've got the wind coming, if my wind is coming towards you, and I've got to cast that way, this is the way to do it for distance, no question at all. Okay. And so I think, I don't know if it's hot where you are, it's bloody hot where I am. So I think those 2 bits, you can teach that. I teach that to intermediate level casters. You know, guys casting 75 to whatever feet, right? Guys who've already got some control. Now you're giving them high line speed delivery shots. Very important, particularly for taking sight shots in saltwater. I think this is essential. Another advantage of this, okay, apart from the fact that you've got more line speed, you've actually got your rod tip down. Your rod tip finishes pointing at the water. There is no way the clouser is going to break your rod. Okay, it's just not going to hit it. You're going to have to be able, and then you're going to have to try really hard to get the clouser to hit that rod tip when the rod tip is down here. Okay, so I would leave it. I always sort of left it there. And then, as I say, I got a student I studied to put together, and now I teach the two bits together, and this is how I teach it. So, stopless delivery in the fall. I'm going to do it onto the water. Start on the water, make the back cast, look at the target, finish pointing the line and the rod, look down the line at the target, look at my front target, come into position, whack. Use that cradle grip if you can, and it does make quite a difference. Oh, look at that. And no end to this guy's talent. So you can put his hat on while he's holding this rod. Yeah, so lost it. What was I talking about? Right. Sorry. Okay. So rod butt under the forearm. Look at the target. And position. Look at the target. Come into position here. A lot of people struggle with this transition, by the way. They're coming from this position to here. This kind of has to happen while that loop's unrolling. Because the cast begins here. This part is slide, right? This if I'm here. This, and I'm changing, taking this forward. This rod is just running along this fly line, so it's not actually pulling the line. So our stroke is really here. Power is this part and this part. That's where we apply the power in these distance casts. So whack in here, whack. Okay, so that's off the ground, and you can practice that a bunch of times. You can't practice that too much. It's one of those things you can keep working on, and I thoroughly recommend you do. And then I found the easiest way to then pick this up is not to cast in the vertical plane where there's a loss of, there can be a lack of tension. I found the easiest way is just to tilt it all over to about 70 degrees. And now keep it in the air. So get to position here. Get some more line out because this is really going to fly now. So right over to the side. Oops, here we go. I find that the easiest way to learn this is off to the side, and then in the water. And then as you've kind of got used to that, Jesus, line everywhere. As that kind of built up, we're going to take that from the side and we're going to stick it up on the vertical. Okay, well, I might have to redo the video, but I have to say I think my casting is a little bit better in this one. I think it's going to fly. Let's have a look. Oh, it would if it didn't tangle. Cold water lines in the tropics. Hear the line speed, right? Oh, not again. If this was a competition, I'd be going nuts. I'm going to win now. And there we go. Alrighty. Anyway, as I say, the two parts that really matter in this, the two parts in this that really matter in this is the delivery, forward and backward. So important to have that back cast delivery. Gluing them together, it's good if you've got long leaders and 3 flies. It's also less jarring on the body. You don't have to cast it as fast as I am. But why not? Alright, hang on. So, summation of that. Okay, so the stopless delivery, exceptionally important to learn, I think, for casting into a wind. It's what you want. That backhand delivery, it just opens up so much more water. It opens up all of this stuff that you don't normally have access to, and in a way that you can get really good at. You can put the fly on, I practice by putting the fly on leaves here. So floating leaf, whack, and it always goes on the leaf, of course. No, it doesn't, but it's a good practice, it's good training. So this delivery here, very important. Gluing it together, once you've learnt the two parts, and maybe under supervision, now, once you've learnt the two parts, you can try. I think you have to have, you have to have those elements of loop control in place first, but there's no reason why you can't learn it, because, you know, we all did, and there was no videos on it. So it's possible to do. It does take a long time. You know, but I have to say, I have found merit in it in my teaching. People who were pretty, as I say, quite robotic in their casting suddenly become, you know, genuinely really nice casters. So it is one of those things that makes a big difference. So yeah, so that's basically it. Hopefully the sound works this time. Otherwise that's it, I'm not doing it again. Anyway, have an awesome week.